It was just about a year ago when I reviewed the Dell Latitude 7470. I gave it a super positive review simply because it just impressed me quite a lot. Now, 1 year later here we have the Dell Latitude 7480. It comes along with a few improvements and also changes. And if these are enough to wow me once again, we will find out in this review. But before that, I actually have this time to go into the configuration and port selection it comes with. Because if nothing has changed, the configuration itself should still have an impact on the top finish, because usually the lowest end model gets a kind of plastic finish, the mid-tier version gets kind of soft touch, and the highest end model gets carbon fiber. But that besides, of course, the configuration was pretty much it. This year though, it also has an impact though on the USB Type-C port, because what my model has is USB Type-C with DisplayPort and power delivery up to 130 watts. But what the higher end models get is Thunderbolt 3, which then fully supports Dell's own Thunderbolt 3 dock and their power bank. So this is definitely something you have to keep in mind if you want to choose one of these. But otherwise, I would say let's finally get into the design and build quality. And despite this being just the lowest end model, it still feels very solid. Yes, it flexes a little bit, but the rest feels very well built. And even though it got noticeably lighter compared to last year and a little bit more compact, it is still quite a heavy and bulky one after all. One thing they changed on the bottom is something that I definitely know to appreciate, is the soft touch rubberized feet, because they this time protected very well from sliding. Unfortunately though, the speakers are still at the bottom, and of course you can see the ventilation and so on. But let's get into the port selection. We have still the port for charging, since this model can't be charged via the Thunderbolt, since this is not Thunderbolt on my model. We have full-size HDMI, 2 times USB 3.0, the SD card reader. On the front we can see a little bit of a cutout, doesn't really help all that much though. We have a headphone jack, SIM card tray, since this is the LTE version, a micro SD card slot. I personally would have wished for SD card, but they said that the demand just wasn't big enough. USB 3.0 with power share, gigabit Ethernet, and the Kensington lock. So overall, still very nice, especially in terms of port selection and in terms of build and overall appearance. I still like it a lot. Now, let's try to open it. We have the cutout therefore, but the hinge is just too stiff for that. That's good because it is a very stiff and solid hinge, but one-hand opening is possible even with stiff hinges these days. So this could be improved, a minor thing to complain about. Otherwise, we can of course here see the plastic that does attract quite a few fingerprints. It gets a little bit nasty, but it can be wiped away after all. Now the keyboard is still definitely one of my main highlights when it comes to Latitude keyboards, because the typing experience is just so great with the amazing feedback, nice amount of travel. It's also very quiet. 2 levels of backlight, a great layout, all the secondary functions that you need are there. So nothing to complain about here, actually a lot of praise. I still love it. We have a track pointer. I can't really judge that one so much because I don't really use it so far, but if you are a business user who wants that, this is still available. Now when it comes to the trackpad, I'm not the biggest fan of that, because I just feel that it kinda is a little bit sensitive. Of course you can tweak that in the quite capable settings, but I didn't get quite that what I wanted. And that's why I would kind of wish for them to switch like they did on the XPS series to a precision trackpad, but it gets the job done. Especially the surface feels very nice, the buttons work out quite good. So I can't really complain all that much, but I'm just not a fan of that. So I would say let's get into the next thing, which would be the display. This would be the 1080p display, 14 inches of course, and it is actually one that I have to judge quite subjectively, because if I just check it objectively, the numbers make it maybe don't appear so great, because 96% of sRGB and 77% of Adobe RGB, along with a gamma that is, even though it's just slightly off, still off. The gray values are there. The brightness, in my opinion, is absolutely fine, because about 330 lux at 100%. I used it at around 30 or 40%, which then is at around 130 lux, which is what I usually use. Then the black values are really good, maybe not so much on the highest level, but that is normal. The contrast maybe not super strong, and the white point was a little bit on the colder side, which would make it seem like it's not an impressive screen, but I have to say I am super pleased with it, because usually I don't like 1080p matte displays. Not an issue here, because they managed to actually make it still quite sharp. Yes, it's not super sharp, after all just 1080p on 14 inches with matte, so it's not super vibrant and super clear, but it is okay, especially for a business device. The white, like I said, a little bit on the colder side, not an issue for me though. The black, super nice and deep, very uniform, no light bleed, top. And the colors, I have to say, nicely done, because they still seem vibrant, natural, quite accurate. The contrast or anything like that lacking is not an issue at all. So this is actually one of the most pleasing 1080p matte displays that I've used so far. So all is good here, and that's why I would say let's get into the speaker. Let's launch the track. Okay, before my final judgment, I just want to quickly go into the Wavesmax Audio Pro software, because you should definitely enable that, but maybe not leave it on the default settings, because then I thought it was just a little bit too much of distortion. So maybe lower the bass a little bit, maybe tweak a little bit on the settings, and then you will get an, I would say, okay experience. It's still not great, because maximum volume was okay, good enough in most cases, but it still wasn't a really warm, full, rich sound. So I would still wish for them to improve the speakers, and especially not put them anymore on the bottom. Headphone jack was quite okay though, and that's why I would say let's go already into the performance. If we check the SSD speeds, we will get about 550 of read and 500 of write speeds. Maybe not super great, especially not the read speeds, but for a business device this is absolutely fine. The boot time though of 18 seconds is quite long, I just have to give it to that. Scrolling in the browser with the mouse, absolutely no problem. And as you can see, even with the trackpad, very smooth and absolutely capable. So no complaints here. I can't really judge the touchscreen performance since I don't have the touchscreen here. But otherwise, I will say pretty much the same as on any other dual-core Ultrabook. Performance in all daily tasks, absolutely without any problems, top. If you want to do some maybe light photo and video editing, also gaming, it would be possible. It wouldn't be a great experience, and it is a business device, so definitely not planned for that. But I can tell you the performance for a business use is absolutely there. And that's why I would like to go to the next part, which would be noise and sound and noise and heat, starting off with the noise test. Okay, now that you've heard the fans, here's what I have to say about the noise. Because the great thing here is that in normal everyday tasks, this device stays pretty much near dead silent. The fans never kicked in at all, only under load, which is highly respectable. Of course, maybe don't block the intakes too much, because then it could happen. But otherwise it was pretty much near silent, but only near silent because coil whine is a thing here. But not an issue for me, because I heard it from about 20 or 30 centimeters, but definitely not in a normal sitting distance. And unless you maybe sit in a pitch black room with heightened senses, I don't see this to be an issue. And the fans itself, even under full load, stay very, I would say, subtle, and they manage never to go too loud or noisy or whiny or something like that. So noise, absolutely great in my opinion. I can't say anything about that. In terms of heat, also no real complaints, especially under normal idle or light use. It stays very nice, quite cold, absolutely nice, because it maybe gets like to about 30 degrees in the middle, which is nothing to really talk about. Under load, yes, it gets a little bit higher, especially then the CPU goes to 86 degrees. Which is quite hot, but it didn't really throttle, not what I like to call throttle, and the device itself didn't really feel warm or too hot to use it on your laps or anything like that. So even here, I have to say, really, really nicely done. Now, when it comes to the battery, a full charge takes about 2.5 hours, which doesn't really mean all that much though, since on a Latitude device you can just go in the BIOS and choose one of 4 different kind of charging patterns. This is adaptive, which, like I said, take 2.5 hours. There is also an express option, which then should charge in well under 2 hours. And there is also a kind of more battery saving one that kind of puts less stress and charges a little bit slower. So it's nice to have these options. But the highlight here, in my opinion, is definitely the battery life itself. Because what I managed with my quite heavy use already, with a brightness of about 40%, was at least every time 9 hours, but usually actually averaging at 10 plus. And if I consider a more moderate use from normal people, since I know from experience I drain the device a little bit faster, I would most people expect to get an average of 11 to maybe 12 hours and up to even 14 hours. And that's why I will say this Battery life is fantastic. Software, not really all that much to say. I had a little bit of a driver issue with the sound driver, so I had to roll back to an older one to get the Waves Audio Max software running. Otherwise, I had no problems at all. I installed the Creators Update without any issues, didn't run into any bugs, so all is good here as well, and that's why I would like to go to the pros and cons. Starting off here would be to be called out the solid build quality. I really like that. It's maybe not super compact or something like that, but it comes along with a very good port selection. Just keep in mind the Thunderbolt 3 port. Great keyboard, absolutely. Track pointer is still present for all the business people who want that. Even though maybe not objectively, but subjectively, I have to say it is a very good display. Speakers, just decent though. I want improvement here, but it's a business device, so I can get past that. Very good daily use performance, absolutely stable thermals with good noise levels, actually very good, pretty much silent in normal use, with pretty much no coil whine to speak of, and fantastic battery life. On the not that great side to be called out would be the slightly big and bulky device for these days. After all, it can't be opened one-handed, which is something that bugs me a little bit. Slightly frustrating trackpad, and the speakers tend to slightly distort. But that's pretty much all there is to say. So I might not sound quite as impressed like I did last year, but that's mostly due to the configuration that I got. Because last year I got the highest end model with the best specs and of course the beautiful Quad HD displays, and everything was just great. Not maybe quite so much though the battery life. This year, since I have the lower end model, my opinion is just a little bit more, that's a little bit lower, just because I didn't get the great display, even though it is fully satisfying. But what I got here is the absolutely fantastic battery life. But I'm pretty sure that this year, even if you take the higher end model, even with the i7 and the Quad HD display, just because of Kaby Lake being so efficient, you will get at least great battery life, even though maybe not fantastic. But if you are a business user and 1080p is all you want, the performance on this one will absolutely be enough. It is quiet, it handles everything well, the keyboard is great, so all qualities are super high, and I can't really see much of a negative impact. Of course, like I said, it's maybe not super compact and lightweight anymore, but not all business devices are a Lenovo ThinkPad Carbon or something like that, so just keep that in mind. I have to say, with higher end specs, which I would wish for next time, I would be even a little bit more impressed, but considering what configuration I got here, I'm totally fine. I can't really judge the pricing though, since I just gave that up a long time ago on Dell devices, especially in the US. You get so much better prices, but I gave you all the pros and cons, and I think you can quite nicely decide on what to do now. And if you like the review, give it a thumbs up, maybe a subscription, and leave the comments down below. And yeah, this would have been it. Have a nice day. Bye.